current crisis. Sunday on C-SPAN, beginning at 8 and 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Up next, we look at the role of business in the process of German unification. You will hear the comments of Lothar Griessback, a German embassy representative for trade and industry. This event is sponsored by the National Capital Chapter of the National Association of Business Economists.
And it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Lothar Griessback. Lothar is the representative of German industry and trade. It's a combination of the Association of German Chambers of Industry and Commerce and the Federation of German Industries. He's been in that position since 1976. Prior to that, Mr. Griessback served as staff director for the Free Democratic Party caucus in the Parliament of Berlin, West Berlin, of course, former West Berlin. And after completion of legal studies, he spent 5 years in private practice, working as a corporate counsel for a conglomerate of companies in that city. He holds a doctorate in public international law from the University of Berlin and a Master of Arts degree from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Medford, Massachusetts. Lothar Griessback.
Thank you. It is a pleasure being here. The subject matter is very dear to me, and if I may, I'll, in the beginning, if I have done very often, want to recall what it has meant to grow up in Berlin and to be at this time in the country that has so much to do with which has come about in Germany over the last several months. Everybody is very aware of the American contribution. And as things change in the world, maybe Germany is changing a little bit. We certainly hope that the friendship that we have received over the years will continue and maybe take a dimension to solve the problems which, as it can't be different, are now arising from the events that we are witnessing. I have talked on a different occasion about the new role of Germany. Today I'll shift a little bit and narrow it down to the role of German business in the process of Germany. Incidentally, when I gave this other presentation, I mentioned as one example of the role of the position that all the trains in Europe are going to run across Germany, and one of the problems will be to keep them on time. And then in the Richmond newspaper, I was compared with Mussolini because he had made the same comment on Germany. So I hope this is not going to happen today. In any case, the situation is so complex that I really would welcome questions and some form of a dialogue so I can pick up on things that you may want to know about as opposed to what I want to tell you. There are a number of difficulties we are dealing with, of course, in describing the situation. First of all, it's an entirely transient situation. What I am telling you today may not be true tomorrow, and new opportunities and problems may become visible. And clearly, as we are talking about economics here, there's this same type of uncertainty about the statistics. Up to now, there are only separate assessments of the economy. The Federal Reserve, the German Bundesbank, is just moving into establishing a common picture. And I think now that the situation is, as far as the legal ramifications concerned, the jurisdiction is concerned, is one. You have the peculiar situation that you have under one jurisdiction two economies which are completely different. Although the legal imperatives, if you like, are imposed on East Germany, the patterns, the structures, the behavior, most importantly, of most of the people dealing with the situation are the ones of the past. That may be one of the major problems we have to be patient about, to change people's attitudes and to bring them in and adjust as far as possible to their ways and to their needs. Let me quote a number of figures. What is amazing is that, for instance, in the traditional figures that you have in West Germany, a growth rate of 4.5%, and probably, we don't have any reliable figures, in the part east of the Elbe, a decline in growth, a negative growth. You have substantial unemployment figures, actually a decrease in industrial production of, in some areas, up to 50%, in comparison to what I think rightly can be called a boom in West Germany. You have an inflation rate still in Germany, which is another interesting factor, I think, even after the oil price rise of about 2.8%. If you factor the oil price out, you're talking about 2.5% inflation. Unemployment in East Germany, again, is very difficult to assess. In West Germany is 6.5%. In East Germany, you will probably approach a level of somewhere between 15 and 20%. So what can you, under these circumstances, really talk about one economy and one task, if you like, of just one job to do for German business? I think the answer is clearly no. The situation is so different that you have to, in order to be effective, whichever look you take of an economist trying to come up with some clear vision, or a businessman, you have to really go into the country, go into detail, and look at the particular situation that you're interested in. All of us, and I think if there's only one message that I would like to leave with you, all of us are trying to encourage foreigners, in particular US business, to participate in what is going on, not only in East Germany, but also in Eastern Europe, which has a lot to do, mind you, what is happening. This is by no means a closed shop. We have in West Germany a mix of foreign investment and domestic holdings, which amounts to about 30% of the sales contributed to the German economy by companies owned by foreigners. And if things develop normally, you would have that same mix within a very short period of time in Eastern Germany. So everybody is trying to encourage foreign participation. There are institutions in place who are willing to help and very able to help. There are about a dozen or so financing schemes developed by the Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, the Bank for Reconstruction, and commercial banks, which are on a non-discriminatory basis available to everybody, German companies, foreign companies. It seems that the French are, at the present time, a little bit in the lead in seizing these opportunities. But in all candor, as you look at the situation, you cannot, in good faith, say that this is an easy job to do. And let me give you a number of pieces of information on the structure, which tell you what I'm talking about. Aside from having trouble to finding a hotel room and being able to make a telephone call, and with the entire amenities of business we are used to, some of it is just not in place. Which brings me to the general statement that the infrastructure is very poor at the present time. The most acute problem, of course, is telephone service, but the federal Bundespost hopes to have things in place to a working level by the end of the year, which I would find surprising if they manage. But infrastructure, fine. These are things you, as you travel there, you can cope with. But one thing that is the most bothersome is the uncertainty about property, about ownership. By now, I'm sure you have heard that these 8,000, a little under 8,000 or so, formerly state-owned companies are now combined in one operation, which is in German called Treuhandgesellschaft. It's a trust company that is located in Berlin, but has offices all over the country in order to take care of local needs. This company is basically a state agency, if you like, under the supervision of the Ministry of Finance. Has the job to, one, manage, administer these 8,000 companies, and two, if possible, privatize them or sell them. They have now transformed about 200 of these 8,000 into corporate structures according to German or West German or Western standards, meaning transformed them into limited liability companies or stock corporations. Almost none of them has been, I'm not aware of any concluded deal of major proportions which has transferred these companies into private ownership. It's not that they are not trying, but it's such an enormous task to identify the assets, for one, prepare balance sheets which are of any meaning to anyone who is interested in buying them or forming joint ventures or even contracting some product with the management on a basis which has nothing to do with their ownership or their financial viability. This is probably the single most difficult task. You have to know that these combinate, these state-owned companies, account for approximately 7% of the industrial production. They're also, it's not only industrial production, I think that's also necessary to point out, about 2,000 companies which may go to the cities because they're utilities or type of activities which are normally taken care of by counties or by other communal structures. There's a vast holdings in forests and agriculture, but still probably a core of maybe 2,000 to 3,000 companies which are industrial manufacturing companies employing roughly 1.5 million employees. So this is in a way the centerpiece of the reformation or transformation of the economy in East Germany to ease these companies into a market-oriented mode of operation. The person that has rather successfully taken care of this in the starting phase over the last 6 months, Mr. Rohwedder has just been confirmed in his position, and he has I think all the qualifications to do the job, but people watching from the sideline are wishing him well and seeing that he is up to something that has never been done in recent memory. The structure, on the other hand, of East German industry is surprisingly similar to the West German industrial structure. As you look at the various areas, you find that the only significant difference is in services, but machinery, chemical industry, etc., is very close to the level of employment in percentage of machinery, about 17%, that you have in West Germany, which is indicative of the fact that until 40 years ago, obviously, both parts of the country were nevertheless part of a common industrial structure. And as you look at facilities in Sachsen, and as you look back, you will realize that Sachsen, as is Baden-Württemberg in West Germany, is part of an old industrial structure with the tradition of education, work ethics, and other factors which hopefully will make these regions competitive in a short period of time. But then the other day somebody pointed out that one of the leading aircrafts was developed in Sachsen, and people pointed out that it was 40 years ago, and the question is really to what extent what is there in what I call industrial culture is state of the art. The assessments of that are very different. Productivity at the present time, again, I'm sorry, a negative figure, is well below. Estimates range from 30 to 50% of West German or Western productivity. But as you look at individual companies in the machine tool area, printing, others, you find that some of these companies are indeed more or less state of the art. And if they resolve this problem of productivity, will become competitors to their peers in West Germany and in the world within a very short period of time. But as I say, there is the state of organization of these companies is far from satisfactory. So for an American businessman who wants to go in there and whom we encourage to go in there, it's really necessary to do a good deal of homework that you wouldn't have to do in other places. Starting with looking at the assets, seeing what they are worth, looking into property rights, and sounding out the market, the potential market for a product they're looking at, because again, that is something that those are data, market data, which are virtually non-available. In turn, the opportunities, of course, are equally out of the extraordinary. The entire region, and you're talking about about an economy which is about 1/5 of the economy of West Germany, is relatively small, but so underdeveloped in all kinds of aspects, infrastructure I mentioned, but under supply of consumer products, all kinds of services which are not in place, banking, consulting, more down-to-earth things like restaurants, so that you can expect enormous growth rates in these areas. And as a matter of fact, over the last several months, I mean during this year to be precise, 187,000 new businesses have been created and registered. And in turn, only 1,200, roughly 1,200 folded down, which is an indication that people are on the move, and an indication of the opportunities that are there. One question that is always on people's minds is, of course, how this is all going to be financed. I think it's useful to make a clear distinction between private financing and what has to be gathered or provided for from the public budget. The figures you may have heard, there's about roughly 150 billion marks to be collected in what is called Unification fund, which will be spent over several years. You hear a figure of 35 billion that has to go into the telecommunications. I have not seen any figures yet on road construction and railroad improvement. The most significant effort has to be made in replenishing the social services, in particular the rent, social security, if you like, the pension fund, which plays a major role in German and private procurement for your old age. A lot of people rely on these public pension funds in order, there's only one public pension funds in order to sustain their entire livelihood after retirement. And since the East German side has not made any contribution over the last 40 years, and still you have 16 million people to take care of, you can imagine what this means in stocking up on capital funds in order to fill this gap. Same is to a lesser extent for unemployment. They are all entitled as of July 1 to unemployment and are collecting money, although they have never made any contribution into this fund before. So these are the major infrastructure, social services, the major means that have to be supplied by the German government. A more interesting subject, which I will not go into detail because I'm afraid I'm going to get lost, is the provision of money. And the scheme is very interesting, actually, to the banks. It's not really an exchange. People always talk, well, how did you manage the exchange? There's very little exchange in the transition in July. What has happened is that the pension funds, or the pension payments, retirement pay, and the wages from one day to another had to be paid in West German mark on current levels. So I don't think that is accurate. It is accurate to call this an exchange. The only exchange actually that has been done was the transformation of savings, and there are various rates applied, which settled in, I believe it was 1 mark to 180, but these funds have not been entered into the current spending habits. They're still sitting in the account, so it's a pretty neutral element in the monetary supply for the moment. But what is more important, and that's maybe a little bit more pertinent to the very topic, is that the majority of the funds or the effort, financial and otherwise, does have to come from the private sector. It is not to be expected that any public entity will buy any one of these companies. I mentioned the entire, aside from certain subsidization of financing, the entire supply of funds, of assets, if you will, to refurbish the individual companies, to establish banking outlets, anything you can look at aside from the two areas that I mentioned, infrastructure and social services, will have to come from the private sector. Serious estimates on what the capital requirements are literally not available. So any figure you may hear, you just may want to forget. What comes to mind in this context is, of course, in particular, if you look at the demands in even further east in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, is where is all this private money to come from? And then you may ask what is left for the rest of the world as you look at maybe Germany as a financier of some of these activities. I don't think there's a very good answer to it. I think one element you can take some assurance from is that you're not talking really about spending money, about consumption, but about investment. I think it's very important to keep in mind that we are not really talking about lost money, but about a chance for investment, which is going to bring a return of hopefully major proportions in the future. Another element, as you look at the role that German or international business may play, is how the trade patterns will shift. There is, or has been the hope, or at least has been discussed, that East Germany, which had roughly 80% of its foreign trade with countries within the Comecon, would be able to maintain those trading relationships. It appears that this is an assumption which is not going to work for a number of reasons. First of all, the structures in these countries are also changing. So there's little inclination to do things as they used to be done. There's a great eagerness, not only in Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, etc., but also in East Germany, to rather than purchase from these old sources, to go to Western products, which they think are superior to what they used to have. It's not always true, but that's the pattern that is developing. Secondly, the decision makers in this old fabric of the old command structure, as far as they're still in place, some of them are very uncertain about how to deal with a new situation. So you have a problem, a managerial problem, a problem in decision making. I still remember when Glasnost came about, before all this unification became reality, that people said, oh, there should be vast opportunities now in the Soviet Union. The contrary was true. With the liberalization of the economy, perestroika, glasnost, people couldn't sell anything anymore because they couldn't find anyone who could make a decision and was able to deal with business Western way. To some extent, that is also true in East Germany. And then, of course, the major other problem is that the former purchasers, customers for these products, now have a problem to pay for them. That's particularly pertinent to mention for the Soviet Union. Is to what extent you are familiar with the division of labor, but East Germany, for instance, made railroad cars. And they had a major company in the vicinity of Berlin, major contracts with the Soviet Union, supplying a substantial portion of their rolling stock. Now the question is, will the Soviet Union be able to fulfill these contracts? It's not so much the problem whether the East German company is willing to do it. It's the problem whether the Soviet Union will be able to do it. And the same is true for shipbuilding. They have built a substantial number of specialty ships, fishing vessels, others for the Soviet Union, and they can do it. The market is there, but the question is, can the Soviet Union pay for it? So this assumption that, or the hope, I should say, that these connections will survive and provide a basis for the economy are in question, and it is not entirely dependent, as these examples show, on how the East German companies are doing themselves. It depends on factors which are out of their control. I can tell you that people are very eager to join the mainstream and to live as they have seen we are living on television so far. Of course, as you deal with television, there are some perceptions you get which are not holding true once you take a look at these things face to face in reality, and some of them actually are unaware how hard people in the western side of Germany actually work. I tend to think they are not working too hard, but in comparison, there are numerous examples. The construction worker that actually left before, the story I heard from friends, was on a site, and then all of a sudden they ran out of cement, so he went home. But he didn't know that 2 minutes later the next truck would come, because he was used to the fact that there's only one truck a day, and that after this truck has been dealt with, there was no work anymore, and everybody was free to go shopping and do something else. And that's just one example of a number of other ones could be added, where the habits and the expectations are not in tune with what needs to be done in a competing competitive economy. But nevertheless, people are generally working, or the majority is probably working 12 and 14 hours, and as the indication, as this fact indicates of the number of new companies established, the vast majority is eager to get going and better their life in a fashion they had never been able to do before. They're well educated. The East Germans probably overspent on technical education and clearly underspent on managerial training. And all these examples actually are also identified as tasks for German industry. That is, as I said, the restructuring, the provisional installation of institutions, the education. So you have thousands of people, some of them actually fairly underpaid, that try to fill in the gap and get things going, assist in bringing the necessary change about. This is, of course, also true for us if you are asked by somebody whom to approach in East Germany for the chamber system, which is quite different from the American one. The membership is mandatory, and the larger groups in major cities easily employ 200-300 people. They are very active and actually in charge of certain areas of vocational training. So those are the Industrie- und Handelskammer, the chambers, which are reappearing, reinstalled, and ready to assist. You have the banking system, which is in the process of being revitalized, reestablished, and the institution, the sister institutions in West Germany, doing their best to assist, as I said. A little bit this in some of the chamber area, that all these chambers in Erfurt, wherever they are, Leipzig, Dresden, have had the offer of chambers in West Germany to help them. And there was a little bit the story of one bride and 12 grooms. Everybody was rushing in, and they had to pick one or several of the West German chamber in order to work with them to organize themselves. So it is, as a German, and I'm happy to say some other people also outside from Germany tend to get emotional about this, because it's really an unbelievable sight what is happening. But don't get carried away. If you look at it as businessmen or economists, there's hard work to do. But I think it's only fair and right to keep in mind as you do business there that there was more at stake, and that the gains are in other areas than economic ones. It is an interesting question to what extent business has contributed to all this, and it would be silly to claim that it did play a major part. It's a game that people like to play. If something nice happens, everybody is responsible for it. But I think in all sobriety that maintaining business relations as far as it was possible, and I was part of this, as you had heard from my biography here earlier, has helped to keep things going and to actually bring ideas back. Now it's quite a different story. You have to make sure that we don't fade away and give up, think that things are accomplished. There's a lot of work to do, chances, as I said, but I think it's worthy to consider it not only as an economic venture, but something a little bigger than that. And as I said before, it would be nice to see a large number of American corporations, individuals, take part in all this. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Griessback, at the beginning you mentioned one of the main problem is the question of ownership, and I'm sure you as a lawyer are interested in that, and I'm wondering what is happening, not just to corporations that, well, I guess in East Germany you wouldn't have had stockholders, but businesses that were nationalized, but also residential properties of individuals and so forth. What is happening to clarify the true ownership, particularly when the previous owners had gone to West Germany and are trying to reclaim property? What is going on?
There is a provision in the Unification Treaty which established three types or three phases. Yeah, the first one was until 1948, I believe, the expropriations by the SMRD, by the Soviet military administration, where the parties, the negotiating parties, said, okay, let's forget about this. this is too late and too substantial. There's a parallel actually in West Germany. It's called the Bodenreform, the reform where they try to break up large agricultural holdings, and the dissolution of the IG Farben, the chemical trust in Frankfurt. So this is not so unsimilar to what has happened in West Germany. So they said, okay, let's put this to rest. The second phase is this creeping expropriation by the East German government, where they say, all right, basically what we want to do is indemnify previous owners, but the preference is for keeping the people who are now in possession in place and not disown them, if you like. And the third phase is after 1972, where they said, well, we won't even discuss this, this has to be returned. It has also to do with the evidence that is still available. The longer you go back, the more difficult it becomes to come up with a reliable basis for any legal assessment of the situation. The Treuhandgesellschaft has taken it upon himself. They are in this problem also. I mean, they're owners, as I said, aside from managers. So if they have a partner that they're negotiating with in order to sell off property, they don't really know what they are selling. Neither does the buyer, in many cases, know what he is getting. So the Treuhandgesellschaft steps in and guarantees the property. They will, whether this is going to hold up in court, speaking as a lawyer, we'll have to see. But the scheme provides for guaranteeing property and then indemnifying the former owner if he should turn up at one point and say, well, this is really without my consent. There is a deadline, or was a deadline, October 15th, where claims to this property had to be filed. So that, of course, in practice is a starting point that you look at this record and say, is there anybody claiming what I'm buying here? And if this is not the case, you have at least a certainty of an exclusion here. Later you can defend yourself and say, okay, you didn't raise your voice before October 15th. But those are some of the mechanics involved.
So it's really not a major stumbling block.
People are
now
creative, and I don't think it is. What you look at, of course, is not. I mean, you can sit on a piece of property and not own it and have a good time. So that's not the problem. Is to what extent does it factor into the balance sheet? But then you can, for instance, I mean, that's not exactly standard procedure, but something that can be done, that you get a right of usage for 99 years. And then it becomes pretty irrelevant of who actually owns the company or who owns the piece of land you are on. So there are ways to getting around leasing to sort of diminish the importance of outright ownership. This gentleman behind you.
I believe the first cutoff was decided on because the Russian government insisted on it, that would not be opened up again.
I didn't know that. Yeah, it's very possible. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, there's a well-known consultant in Munich by the name of Roland Berger, and he made the prediction that within 5 years, Eastern Germany would be right up equal to Western Germany in terms of standards of living and so forth. My question is, what do you think the right number is? How long will it take before you have some kind of
make that
East-West?
I tend to be optimistic, but you have to. Right now, as I said, there are no. I gave you a few, the establishment of new business, etc. But there are really no. We're talking about 6 months here, maybe a year if you are generous. With a statistical base, there are no hard figures. You can't, in all honesty, you can't tell. You have to. And we're talking about humans here. I cannot predict whether a industrial worker in Chemnitz will in the future work hard and say, okay, no, I'm happy with my unemployment and go to Italy where I can live comfortably without working from it. So these. I think there is really no honest base for saying, okay, at 1990, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll be there. I tend to be optimistic. because all the ingredients are what you will have in the future is this the East-West thing will fade away. Yeah? Already the Saxons protest and say, well, we are not East, we are South. Yeah? Just like Bavaria, and just like Baden-Württemberg, and as you look at the map, it's true. So you will have these regional differences, which you have in Germany anyway. Schleswig-Holstein is a problem area, no industry. You have very close in structure. You have Mecklenburg. Incidentally, the names are of the state. You may not have heard them, but it's Mecklenburg, Brandenburg, Saxony, Thuringia, Sachsen-Anhalt. Yeah? They're not made up to a discharge for an investment. Yeah, they have historical roots. So you will have, as opposed to doing this East-West comparison, you will always probably have Mecklenburg in the north lagging behind Saxony. Yeah? And the overall right now, the one problem that had to be dealt with, if they would have been completely incorporated into the financial distribution system that exists between the German Länder, between the states. All of the Western Länder would have annually had to pay the order of 5 to 6 billion marks to the East German Länder. That's why they didn't do it, because nobody wanted to do that. But that indicates also the gap, and this gap will narrow.
I was just going to follow up. I was in Mecklenburg recently, but for the first time for me, and I thought they had a great advantage of not having any of these terrible industries using brown coal and everything. I mean, it was very pleasant and unpolluted and otherwise inviting, in great contrast to the Leipzig area and so forth.
But so does Schleswig-Holstein, and still it's very difficult to attract manufacturing to Schleswig-Holstein. Yeah, it's true. Yeah? They have to
Manufacturing.
Right,
maybe
they need agriculture. Let's not talk about agriculture. We can avoid it. But there's large agricultural holdings, large, again, I mean, the state-owned, the command economy type of agricultural enterprises. And you have tourism. The entire East Germany is underpopulated. What we hope for is that the balance will be made between West and East, and that the access from other parts of Europe will that's a major problem. Will be kept within reason. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you will have let's use Saxony. I don't know. We'll see whether that's true. Thuringia is another heavily industrial. Brandenburg. Some companies in the area in the vicinity of Berlin have outstanding potential. So you will have maybe Mecklenburg being on the level of Schleswig-Holstein, Sachsen on the level of Baden-Württemberg, and I mean a diversification contribution and difference in economic growth and livelihood that you have now. You have also actually, to bring up another subject, a difference in wage level within West Germany. I don't think it is as, I have never looked actually at what the situation in the United States is, but it's a known phenomenon. And in West Germany, you have in some areas, you get 20% paid 20% less than in other areas. But that is set off usually by cost of living. So this will balance out, I think. Yes?
Really the picture you painted currently is of significantly lower incomes in the eastern part of the country compared to the west, lower industrial production, higher unemployment rate in the east. Even if and when the eastern part of the country's standard of living approaches that of the west, what do you expect to happen in between? Should we expect a lot of migration from east to west, or political protest, or what might we expect?
Again, you can only really speculate on it. Some people are discussing what role the labor unions will play. There are some examples which are not really favorable to, or actually well adjusted to the situation, meaning too high expectations public sector and some industry areas. The migration is still going on, but runs into its natural limits right now because it is not subsidized anymore. Before November, for about half a year last year, there were special, I mean, I wouldn't say incentives. They didn't need any incentive, but support systems, starting with the possibility to register and then get some cash, have, I mean, extraordinary support in placing these people. All this has stopped. Yeah? Now, if somebody gets on a train or into his Trabant and drives to Stuttgart and tries to find an apartment and a job with the, said for the employer, uncertain qualification, that's a different story. So this will slow down, although people will try. Hopefully some people will go the other way also. Yeah. Does that cover it more or less? Or, yeah. What was the question again? You're trying to get carried away. You said the expectation on migration, for instance. Right?
Do you expect much political protest or discord as a
well,
result of
we'll be smarter on that
conditions?
December 3rd. You know, again, something which I find amazing and very interesting. I followed that actually for the first election in May. I was over there, and something I will never forget. You know, these people voting for the first time in their lives. You know, sort of big. I mean, I don't mean to be demeaning about it, but it was like Christmas. Yeah, they're walking in there, looking. That's the way it's done, and they would stand there, and it was in a small town near Berlin. Yeah, they would watch the counting, and then you know, everybody who was, or some of the people were candidates. I mean, just an experience that was just wonderful. Yeah? So, but then as you look at the next 95, 98 participation, as you look at the next election, I think the average was down to 75. Yeah? Now we have the elections coming up in December, and we will see what the predictions are. It will stabilize, maybe go a little bit up. So, you know, after 40 years of not having participated in this type of political exercise, you find out these people, I mean, they're naturals. Yeah? And some say, well, this is crazy, I'm not going to vote on this. Yeah? So you have a very, I think it's not too early to say that you have a very stable political environment, yeah? Which has, of course, to do with the fact that the large West German parties have stepped in and have helped organize, have financed, etc. But still, you know, it is amazing to see that Thüringen, Sachsen, which used to be red, I mean, a traditional labor, socialist, communist area, they all of a sudden they vote 51, what was it, almost close to 50 with 2% Christian Democrat. I mean, what more do you want? You know, I mean, yeah. Yes.
I'd like to ask a question about the electric power situation. I understand that some of the power, the former power plants in the former East Germany are nuclear plants that were built on the Soviet design, and that the German Electric Power Commission has decided that they need to be closed down because they're not really built according to Western safety standards. Question one is, are they having problems providing sufficient electric power in the eastern part of the country? And number two, what plans do they have to expand electric power capacity so that industries that move in can get sufficient electric power?
The supply altogether was sufficient for the East German economy, which was, in comparison, a large one, as the second largest after the Soviet Union and the Comecon. These power plants are, I think they're already shut down. They kept one running for a little while, and then they decided it's not worth the risk. The supply is minimal. I don't know the exact figure, but it is way below 10%, I would say, from atomic energy. The major problem is, and that's almost exclusively environmental problem, that another major portion is lignite, Braunkohle. And these power plants will have to, I mean, it's impossible, I mean, not cost effective, nothing is impossible, but it's not cost effective to put filters in or different burners or other equipment to make them tolerable under environmental controls, I mean clean air standards, if you like. So they have to be, and I don't think there's any, I mean, details I don't have, but if there are any, very few hard coal. So you have a major job here in replacing these facilities. In the meantime, what is possible and is in the process of being installed is feeding electricity from Western sources into the net. So there's no shortage of energy that should prevent anyone from putting up a plant. In the chemical area, which is only partially energy, they're also using. They're connected with the Yamal pipeline, with the gas from the Soviet Union. So there's gas and oil also coming from Soviet sources. Again, there's the problem of incorporation and payment for it. But I don't think the restructuring needs to be done of major proportions. But there's no shortage of supply. Yes.
How well will agriculture in the East adjust to the common agricultural policy?
I thought we excluded talking about agriculture. It is, as the saying goes, an interesting question. You would say, theoretically, again, it's closely related to this property thing. You have the advantage that operational units are formed which by size and the management structure, actually also the machinery available, should be competitive in the agribusiness market. You have huge enterprises. The question is, will they hold together? Which is clearly not the case for some instances where the people just say, well, that's my farm or part of my farm. Actually, the kids were paid for a period of time under the Modo government to remove the landmarks, the marking stones. They got $3 for bringing one of these things in. So they actually tried to erase the traces of private ownership. So we talked about this. The second problem is again the management problem. Will you be able to hold the farm workers in place? Will the management be adjust? The first indications were they were not, because they were selling meat at prices, which we would call dumping prices. Sold off large portions of their livestock just in order to get cash or to get it over with, so to speak. And the third problem is, of course, how will the European agricultural market develop to begin with? And then we are an issue which is clearly pointing beyond the German unification. With the GATT, the subsidization support system program of the European Community, to which the East Germans would be entitled once the situation is clear in concerning who owns these companies, or even before, I would think. There have been some allegations, unfair, I think, that unification has something to do with the price problems they had, and there were demonstrations in France, and they were tied with this unification issue. But I don't think that's justified. Yes.
Are these German business enterprises and individuals subject right now to the normal West German value-added tax and the tax code, or is that being phased in?
The value-added tax is applied. What was the first part? I didn't go
any individual taxes, income taxes or personal taxes.
The taxation system has been adopted. the general tax scheme. Corporate taxation, income taxation. This battle, if you like, as political debate, is not quite over. The new minister president of Sachsen, Biedenkopf, actually is a champion of establishing different tax rates in East Germany. Most people say it can't be done. What disadvantage there is has to be done, leveled off by some other means than having a different tax structure. It's in a way it's a kind of a theoretical problem, because what's the American term, the Finanzamt, the Internal Revenue Service is not in place. So some people have no idea that you ought to pay taxes and how much, and it's not collected. So it will be a while before this is sort of normal, and then hopefully by then they will be able to pay whatever is due.
But they didn't decide on how the value-added taxes will be distributed among the states. And there was this problem that
Right.
too much of it would flow to East Germany if they used
Yes.
the regular formulas, so that
Right.
I believe they settled on 55% on the TAP formula.
Something like that. In any case, they made I mentioned it earlier, they made an adjustment to the which is part of the political structure in West Germany to the
That was that
exchange system between the länder.
The reasoning behind that was that East Germany wasn't going to be producing as much revenue from the value-added tax
Yeah.
as the Western states would for a while at least.
Yes.
Yeah, it's my impression that the German outlook is far more internally oriented than it's been for a long time. In Eastern Europe, the initial fear that Germany would take over economically is being replaced by a fear that it won't try. And in the Mideast, Germany seems to not like what it sees, or in any case, the internal developments form a good excuse for keeping the detention focused internally. I'm wondering how much of the economic integration of the new Germany is in fact dependent, since it's such an export-oriented economy, on what happens outside Germany.
If you take the statistics which describe, in a reliable fashion, the situation in the past, you're talking about 80%, as I said, export I should say to Eastern Europe. The all-over export figure in East Germany is a little lower, I think, than in West Germany, where we're talking about close to 30% of GNP attributable to foreign trade. East Germany is around, I would say, 15% or so. But that's trade. And I think these concerns about the Germans taking over are more related to investment. And people are of two opinions, as they should. Everybody should be of two opinions on anything. But the one, as you indicated, one say, well, where are the Germans? We need the money, we need whatever they have. And where are the Americans? Where's everybody else? And then you have concern, they say, well, is it really such a good idea to get them in here? This year, in Germany, I am going to Germany regular, and I am desperately trying to find somebody to talk about America. They're either not there or they want to talk about East Germany. So everybody is focused. You must admit this is a task of historical proportions, and I think it's excusable. On the other hand, people will and are sober. They're sobering up very quickly. And they will look at, as business people, the government, that may be a different story, which the government has political priorities, business has business priorities. They will look at where can I make 2%, 10% profit. And then the chips are probably falling whoever is providing the best opportunities. And in that game, I think it's safe to assume that the United States will maintain its position and become the focus again. But again, back to a point that I made before, it's the size, considering the size of the German economy, which is roughly one fifth of the U.S. economy and one third, I believe, of the Japanese economy. It's clear that the resources, neither financial nor managerial, are sufficient in the Federal Republic to have a major impact. So in a way, officials and companies are fighting this expectation as well. We can't do anything and everything at the same time. I think everybody is willing and trying in good faith, but the ultimate yardstick must be what are the profits. Yes.
In terms of what used to be East Germany, you can mention any examples of industries which have good expectations for high growth or possibly good opportunities for foreign investment?
The experience, I think, as you look at the European community, is that the growth rates are largest where the compatibility is there. I can't tell you, otherwise I wouldn't say it here. I would ask you to get your checkbook out first. I can't tell you in which area you have to go in order to be successful. I mean, clearly, you can say there are no restaurants. Okay, go build a restaurant, or there are no hotels. Marriott is trying. Other companies are trying. So there are some easy answers. It becomes a little bit more difficult in other industrial products, but developing on this idea of compatibility, clearly machinery is an area one should look at. And a substantial number, I think there are about 2,000 companies in this area. Yeah, not less maybe. I have the figures here if I can look them up, but I don't want to go through the papers. But about one-fourth of these machinery companies have already established some form of joint venture or collaboration. It became fashionable very quickly in East Germany to put a sign on your gate, this is cooperative with so and so in Stuttgart. Yeah? So they showed off and were very proud if they had hooked a Western partner. So, and as I said, the capabilities are there. They're undercapitalized. The equipment is fairly old, although you must say that they have shown a certain preference for buying Swedish, Swiss, and if they had to, West German equipment in some machinery segments. Precision mechanics, optical equipment. So in all these areas where there is a strength on the other side, and as I say, this compatibility, I think that would be interesting to look into. Chemical industry, very difficult. They have a fairly large chemical sector, so there are two parameters. The Chemical Association in Germany says, well, this is an energy problem. Most of it, 70% or so, is based on lignite, which is unacceptable, cost, environmental reasons. But 30% is on the base of Soviet gas. So there you are. You have a reliable source of energy and an established industry. So even with mass production, paint, stuff like that, there's a chance there, and also pharmaceuticals, possibly. But the chemical company is a particular interesting area also because the ties to the West German companies are very strong. The Höchst executive went over to, I don't actually exactly know where the plant is, but the company had in the 30s built two identical office buildings, one in Frankfurt and the other one there. So when he had to get up from the conference table to do what, somebody offered to show me. No, I don't know. I don't know exactly where the place is. I need to go. Completely identical buildings. Yeah. So people in this area and in others also try to assess whether they should cooperate. Particular interesting example is Zeiss, which had its home in Jena. I guess it's fair to say it's in West and East Germany, one of the leading companies in optical and precision mechanical products. The Department of Defense was shocked to see what they were able to make and sell to the Soviet Union under the aspects of export controls. A very capable enterprise. So again, you have, the vast majority of the stockholders, engineers, emigrated to West Germany and established Zeiss Oberkochen. Now they're thinking, well, are we still one? Yeah? So that is a situation which would be a little difficult to penetrate by a foreigner, incidentally. I say, all right, that you have to play very carefully if you want to get in there. All right.
I'd like to thank Dr. Griessback for his wonderful and interesting talk today.
Thank you.
Our next meeting is going to be held on December the 12th, and we're going to have Jim Miller, who's the president of Citizens for a Sound Economy and former director of OMB, giving us a talk on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This briefing on the role of business in Germany will reair on the overnight program schedule. Join us again Thanksgiving morning at about 6 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 Pacific. Up next, the remarks of author George Plimpton.
Here are some recent letters from